Well, as we tape this, the election is 1 week away, but already millions of Americans have made up their mind. They've cast their ballots through early voting. President Obama himself voted early this year. Out on the stump, Bill Clinton recently stood in front of a banner that read not Obama or even forward, but rather vote early. Or to complete the phrase made famous by Chicago gangsters, those would be the Chicago gangsters of the 1920s, not the current crop of Chicago gangsters. Vote early and vote often. Well, joining me now to get to the bottom of these shenanigans are Steve Green, and sitting in for the waterlogged but otherwise okay Scott Ott is our friend Steve Kruder. Welcome, lads. Steve Green, let's start with the basics. Is it a good idea to have people cast their ballot before all the facts are in, before the debates, before any last-minute developments, before meltdowns caused by desperation and personal character? In other words, Steve, is Obama trying to get millions of people to vote early before they fully realize just how small and awful a man he really is?
Oh, well, I think it's a little late for that, not just after the Denver debate, but, geez, after the last 4 years from what we've seen. But you know what? For me, it doesn't come down to that. What it comes down to, and why I'm against early voting, absentee ballots are fine if you know you're going to be out of town or you're stuck at home for health reasons or something like that. But this mass early voting, look, voting is a civic virtue. It's time we went back to treating it like that instead of treating it like an inconvenience. This is something we should be proud to do. This is something we should be proud to take the time and trouble and do as a people. You know, there's something almost uniquely American, because we're the ones who started this stuff about going to your polling place and standing elbow to elbow with your fellow citizens to do your civic duty, to do your civic virtue. And I want to see more of that, not less of that.
It's almost like there should be a day upon which you have an election. You might call it Election Day. Steve Kruder, how early do you think you should be able to vote if you can vote early? Do you think you should be able to vote a month early? How about a year early? Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you vote for Obama on his first and second term by voting the same 4 years in 2008? I'm voting for him now. I'm going to vote for him next time, too. What's wrong with Election Day, Steve, and absentee ballots? And why do you think the Dems are so strong behind this idea?
Well, the first reason is that because if you get someone to vote early, there's more time to figure out how to get them to vote a second time. Now, look, I'm no conspiracy theorist except when it comes to voter fraud by the Democrats. And I think that they're always working on it. I think it's one of their favorite things to plan and plot out. And so there's more room to maneuver that. The other thing, I think you should be able to vote ahead of time if, as Steve said, you're going to be, because of health reasons or work reasons, unable to vote, or you're expatriated or you're deployed, okay? And then you need to make sure there's adequate time to get the ballots in. No other reason. What we're seeing here now is people just being lazy. They don't want to stand in line. It's the everybody gets a trophy garbage coming back to haunt us again. Oh, make it easier. I want every Iranian, or anybody Iraqi, I mean, who risked their lives or risked beatings to go vote a few years ago, to bring their purple fingers and come over and stick them in the eyes of the people who think they have such an arduous task getting to the polls on Election Day here.
Exactly right. That's why we have absentee ballots. Well said, Mr. Kruder. Steve Green, back to you, and back to the fraud issue that Steve mentioned just a moment ago. Vote early and vote often. Since the Democrats have pushed for the abandonment of any voter ID laws, what's to stop someone from voting early in a solidly Obama state that, well, let's say Minnesota? Well, when I say solidly Obama, I mean leans Obama, or maybe rather I should say is a toss-up at the point. But what's to stop somebody from voting in Minnesota and then on Election Day go cast another vote in a state that's leaning Obama, or, well, rather a toss-up, or hang on, let me just check the latest results. Actually, Romney is leading in a place like Ohio, for example.
Yeah, you know what? This is what's so instructive about the latest Project Veritas videos from James O'Keefe. The first one he released showed one of his undercover agents, reporters, going to OFA headquarters in Texas, where they had Florida absentee ballots for her to choose from. Isn't that interesting? Not Texas. Yeah, Texas isn't going to go blue no matter what. So they have Florida ballots. Voter fraud is real. It's an exclusive property of the left. And nobody wants to disenfranchise anybody, which is why we have to crack down on voter fraud. Because as a point you've made several times, if my vote is invalidated by your fraudulent vote, then I'm the one who's disenfranchised, not you for having to show ID.
Correct. I've made that point several times, and I usually try to credit it to our guest, Steve Kruder, because I seem to remember him being the first one to point it out. Steve, All of this early voting is supposed to prevent voter suppression at the expense of a little extra voter fraud. But you said that voter fraud is voter suppression. You care to elaborate on that astonishingly excellent point of yours?
Well, you can suppress the vote before the fact, or you can suppress the vote after the fact. And if you have somebody voting illegally, somebody who shouldn't be voting, they are then canceling out the vote of someone who voted legally, which
Boom.
is the same as not letting them get to the polls at all in the first place.
Boom.
It is voter suppression straight up. And it is wrong, and it is what they've been doing. I mean, it's the reason we have Senator Al Franken and Obamacare right now, is because they were finding votes in trunks and then disallowing votes that were probably legal in the first place. But you get a judge, you get an activist judge, and suddenly the election comes down to the judge who's making decisions on whether it looks like a legit ballot or not. So if you're canceling out a legit vote, it's voter suppression, the same as if you block somebody from getting to the polls on Election Day.
That's exactly right, my friends. And if you look at what happened in Minnesota with Franken's victory, you found that they would, if there was a set of rules that led to a favor for Franken, they would do that. If they found a different set of rules that led in favor of Franken, then they would do that. We have to vote these people out of office so we can recover the sanctity of this electoral process. Look, my friends, I hate this early voting for the same reasons we've just listed. First of all, it locks in votes before all of the late-breaking facts and character quirks are revealed. Second, it allows all kinds of chances for a person to cast a vote in one place a week or two before the election, and then in a voting booth on the day of the election. I think it's cheating. I'm sure it's cheating. I know it's cheating. I think it's exactly like a kid who wants his Christmas presents early. Now, some households allow kids to open one present on Christmas Eve, but what if you wanted all your Christmas presents a week before Christmas? Or what if you wanted to open them on Thanksgiving? Or what if you wanted to open your Christmas presents on Halloween? If you allow that, what does Christmas even mean anymore? We vote on Election Day, and we have, through absentee ballots, a mechanism to allow for people who cannot physically get to the polls on Election Day. And this year, the great irony of the vote early Democratic ploy is twofold. First of all, an analysis of early voting shows that Republican early voters are mostly people who would not be physically able to vote on Election Day. Consider these additions to the November 6 tallies for Republicans. But most of the Democratic early voting turns out to come from people who could have voted on Election Day, but are listening to Clinton and Obama and voting early. Consider these votes deductions from people who will be voting on Election Day. The GOP is adding Election Day tallies, and the Dems are cannibalizing their Election Day numbers. That's number one, and that's awesome. But number two, according to the latest analysis out today, this massive vote early Democratic strategy is returning a lopsided 52-45 lead for Mitt Romney. Don't get cocky. Get out there and vote. For PJTV, I'm Bill Woodall.